illusions of features that may be present in faces but may not themselves be faces. So if you look at this image, most people can't tell what that is. On the other hand, if you look at this image, sometimes it takes a second, but most people eventually get it. This is actually the same image. So it's not just the curves or dots or angles in the image, because they're the same. It's the same image. It's whether you perceive a face in the image or not.
For humans and other social primates, decoding faces is essential. A brief glance can tell you who someone is, their sex, their mood, and enables us to judge if they are friend or foe. Repeated processing of faces over time may actually feed back to change the structure of our brain.
It is known that the cortex is very plastic and organizes itself around the experiences it has. So maybe simply because we look at faces all the time in our daily lives, that is sufficient to produce a special purpose patch of cortex that does face recognition. But of course, the other perfectly plausible story is that recognizing faces was so critical to the survival of our primate ancestors that natural selection helped shape cortical machinery dedicated to face recognition.
There's another kind of visual processing the brain engages in that's called the mind's eye, the mental imagery that occurs while we think about scenes and objects. Researchers have now discovered that many of the brain areas used for vision are also the same as those used while we imagine. Stephen Koslin of Harvard University has been investigating the relationship between these two complementary visual systems.
Wouldn't it be a pity to let 40% of your brain just be involved in perception? Why not usurp that, use it in thinking as well? And that's what mental imagery is all about.
Mental imagery allows us to manipulate what we have stored in visual memory, so we can use that information to anticipate and solve problems.
And this sort of looks like an oxygen mask, but it's actually...
With another brain imaging technology, PET scan, Koslin's team has studied how visual perception and mental imagery overlap. On a computer screen, subjects imagined the letter inside a grid. An X was displayed. The subjects had to indicate if the X touched the imagined letter. Finally, they identified objects displayed at oblique angles. Of all the brain areas active in mental imagery and in vision, 2/3 were activated in common. We quite literally see with our mind's eye. We even move our eyes in the same way while we imagine a scene as when we visually scan the scene in the external world. For example, think of your living room. As you do, you'll scan the walls looking for details, count the windows, even zoom in on objects in about the same amount of time as you would if you were actually viewing it.
When you generate an image, you're conjuring it up. Often you actually build up an image by putting parts on it. So you've got forming images, you've got image inspection, which can involve scanning around or zooming in, interpreting patterns in images. You've got holding on to images over time, and image transformations, which include rotating, expanding, bending, various kinds of other things. Each of those abilities is carried out by a host of separate processes. We can piggyback on this enormously complicated system that helps us navigate in the world to also anticipate what we would do or to think about possibilities that don't exist currently.
Using fMRI, researchers have revealed how the brain is changed by what it experiences, how it is dynamic, never static, how brain structure is changed by brain functions. It is, in a sense, a plastic brain, reshaped by what it learns, remembers, and practices. A powerful example of this responsive brain is learning how to read. Mastering the complex collection of symbols that represent language is one of childhood's greatest challenges. It is a learned skill that over time reorganizes our plastic brain. To understand how the brain adapts to reading, John Gabrielli of Stanford University presents subjects with a difficult task: reading text presented backwards.
The subject will go into the scanner and perform with words presented mirror reversed. And they will perform very slowly and make many mistakes. After they come out of the scanner, we have them practice the task many times in the laboratory until they get much better at doing the task.
After thousands of trials, the effort of deciphering the text becomes less conscious, more automatic. When the subject is expert, it's back to the scanner again.
So we have before and after snapshots of their brain when they're not good at doing the mirror reverse text reading versus when they're very good at doing that. During the initial phase of poor performance, we see lots of activity in right parietal cortex, a part of the brain that's very involved in visual spatial thinking, and that we interpret as people doing mental flipping of letters. After people become very good, we see activity in that part of the brain decline, in fact disappear, and now lots of areas in the verbal left hemisphere become active. It's as if the left hemisphere, the language hemisphere, has gained skill now in dealing with this unusual presentation of letters, and your normal language systems can come into play and take full advantage of everything you know about words and letters. The shift must reflect that when we're initially doing tasks that we're poor at, we just don't have the information we need to do well at it. Through trial and error and struggle and great effort, our minds acquire new information that lets us approach the task differently. But it must take some time for the brain to get that information in such a way that it can use it, until enough knowledge is gained through experience to allow other parts of the brain to take over and do a really terrific job.
She climbed to the tippity top of the tree, gazing out on the world. She sobbed, "Where could Mom be?"
This kind of practice, combined with brain plasticity, is the foundation of a child's ability to read. But for some, reading is a skill that can take years to master. For children with dyslexia, the challenge is more than a vision problem. It lies in the spoken part of language.
That can be exemplified by the following little game you can play with yourself, okay? How do you say the word plate without the first sound, the first phoneme, p? And the answer to that is late. Now, individuals who are dyslexic, who are completely intelligent, have had very successful lives, even as adults, many times, cannot play these simple games.
That was my dad's Father's Day gift one year. I got him the...
Phonemes are the smallest units of sound within words.
Environmental health specialists now.
For example, s, p, e, ch. All together form the word speech.
Speech.
But I don't even know if it's always better.
These sounds, essential for decoding spoken language, are also the building blocks of reading and writing. In normal conversation, phonemes can be as short as 8 milliseconds. Phonemic awareness requires processing by a high-speed language area of the brain, usually located in the left hemisphere. But for many children with dyslexia, this area fails to activate. It's a problem that interferes with their ability to read. To solve this problem, Paula Tallil of Rutgers University has developed computer games that capitalize on how the brain changes as skills are mastered. The computer slows and amplifies